Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so welcome and thank you for attending today's meeting of the San Francisco Children and Youth Fund Oversight and Advisory Committee. I hope you all have been well. We ask that everyone please mute themselves when not speaking to avoid sound interference. If you're a member of the public and would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call you for public comment. Just as a reminder, comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. So we're going to go with the first item on the agenda, which is call to order and roll call. Rebecca, can you please start the roll call?
Yes. Member Andre Torre.
Present.
Member Aaron Yan is absent. Chair Jada Curry.
Present.
Member John Henry.
Present.
Member Leslie Simmons.
Present.
Vice Chair Molly Matul.
Here.
Member Skylar Dang.
Here.
Member Ryan Galvez.
Present.
We have quorum.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Before we move on to our next item, I'd like to formally welcome our 2 new OAC members, Ryan Galvez and Skylar Dang, who will be filling our youth seats. So it's been some time that they are here. Numbers 1 and 2, those are the seats that they will be filling. Ryan and Skylar, if you could each introduce yourself and tell us one thing that you're looking forward to in joining the OAC. Any particular order, you can go ahead and unmute.
I can go first. My name is Ryan Galvez. I go to Lowell High School. And one thing I wanted to do when joining the OAC is help contribute to my community in San Francisco, helping the youth. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Skylar. I'm a sophomore at Balboa High School. Sorry, I'm in a public room right now. But one thing I'm looking forward to is getting to know all of you and just expanding my network. And yeah, I look forward to working with all of you.
All right, thank you both and welcome again and can't wait to have your formal swearing in. All right, so moving on to our second item, general public comment. Raphael, is there any public comment for items not listed on the agenda?
Sorry, Chair Jada, I just want to
Yes.
publicly state that, so yes, we want to welcome Skylar and Ryan. Unfortunately, because you're not officially sweared in yet, you cannot vote on anything, on any of our items today. You can, participate, but unfortunately you won't be able to vote. So just want to say that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, let's see. Oh, and sorry, go ahead, Molly. I think you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so does that mean that we have quorum for voting on these items?
Yes,
Okay,
we still have quorum.
Okay, but they just can't vote. Okay, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, so moving on to our second item, general public comment. Raphael, is there any public comment for items not listed on the agenda?
There are no public comments.
All right, then public comment is closed. The next item on the agenda is the review and approval of the January 2023 minutes. Raphael, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments.
Okay, public comment is closed. Are there any comments from the committee on January's meeting minutes?
There are no public comments.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from January?
So moved.
All right, a second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Rebecca, can you please take a roll call vote?
Member Andre Torre.
Aye.
Chair Jada Curry.
Aye.
Member John Henry.
Aye.
Member Leslie Simmons.
Aye.
Vice Chair Molly Matul.
Aye.
The minutes are approved.
All right, perfect. The next item on the agenda is the resolution to allow teleconference meetings. Raphael, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments.
Okay, committee members, do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, two at the same time, I like it. Okay, Rebecca, can you please take a roll call vote?
Member Andre Tory,
Aye.
Chair Jada Curry,
Aye.
Member John Henry,
Aye.
Member Leslie Simmons,
Aye.
Vice Chair Molly.
Aye.
The resolution is passed.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. All right, so we are into the next portion of the meeting, which is the fifth item on the agenda, which is, it's a little out of order, but I'm going to go ahead and give the report of the OAC chair now. So we're still talking about the bylaws. They have been updated during our November and our January meeting as well. We tabled the actual vote on approving the bylaws, so we're just going to return to this vote and hopefully move forward, get approval. So the edits proposed at our last meeting that were to be made to the bylaws was to make it clear to always maintain a virtual meeting option and remote option if possible. So that is on page 4 of the bylaws. And on page 5, we wanted to maintain that there's 5 days in regards to changes being made to the agenda leading up to OAC meeting. So there is language, oh, thank you, Rebecca. So there is language now that constitutes 5 days prior to a regular meeting, but as it was discussed at our January meeting, in the executive committee, when we were talking about this, we were thinking to have it be a 7-day requirement still of notification to the chair of agenda items to be discussed at a regular meeting, because this will give us enough time leading up to the meeting to go ahead and talk amongst each other and get ready, basically to prepare for the meeting. So with this, so as the bylaws stand now, it still says 5 days, but I wanted to hear from you all. Is there any comment, or sorry, I'll go with public comment first, and then we'll return for a committee discussion. Raphael, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments.
Okay. Is there any committee comments on the bylaws as they stand now? All right, Molly, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to express my support, and I agree with you, Jada, for section 6, setting of agendas, that if it can be said that we get the executive committee shall request items no less than 7 days prior to regular meeting, just again to, it takes, well, Rebecca does a lot of the work. It does take a village to update an agenda and prepare for that. And if a member is bringing forth an item to discuss, we want to make sure that it's set up well, so there's meaningful attention to that particular item in the meeting. And so I think 5 days is a little tight since we have to get the agenda out at 3 days notice. So I would concur with Jada's recommendation of 7 days. That's it.
Thank you. Any other committee discussion in regards to the bylaws? Okay, so Rebecca or Dory, can we propose that this change be made but still be able to vote on it today, or do we have to make the change and then vote on it during our next meeting?
Chair Jada, you can propose to approve the bylaws with the amendment of 7 days, and
Okay.
then it'll be.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so we are, do we have a motion to approve the bylaws with the amended change for 7 versus 5 days? That is on page 5.
I'll move it as amended with 7 days.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye, all those opposed say no. Rebecca, can you take a roll call vote?
Member Torre,
Aye.
Chair Jada,
Aye.
Member John,
Aye.
Member Leslie,
Aye.
Vice Chair Matul.
Aye.
The bylaws are passed.
Okay, thank you.
It's been a long road. Thank you, everybody.
It definitely has been. It has been. This is like one of the next, this has been an ongoing step for our governance process. So yes. Very, very glad that it's approved. And that pretty much concludes my OAC chair report. So we can move on to the next item, which is the budget presentation by Heidi. So Heidi, I will go and pass it to you.
Great, thank you. We have a brief slide deck I'll run through today, and then I can answer any questions. All right, thank you. For anyone who saw this last month, you're going to see some of the same slides at the beginning. I'll give the big picture, and then the last couple of slides are going to go into detail about our departmental budget submission, including all of the issues that we highlighted in our discussion last month. All right, so next slide, please.
I think we're having technical difficulties in setting up the right screen. for
Okay.
the slides.
Cool. All right, I'll give it a second. And I'll just talk through the timeline while we sort that out. The budget instructions went out in December. At that point, we received information about the required general fund cuts. Thanks, Raph. And from December until next week, we have time to develop our departmental submission. So here's where we are. The blue arrow, we'll submit our budget to no later than next Tuesday. What we're showing in this presentation is likely what we'll submit. We still have a few balancing issues around work orders with other departments, but do not expect any significant changes in the next few days. All right, next slide. A recap of the city's fiscal outlook for 23 and 24, the next two fiscal years. The highlight really is the shortfall of $728 million due to slow or no growth in tax revenues, loss of federal revenues and other one-time sources, and some new set-asides from the 2022 election measures, including pension contribution and other costs. Sorry, I'm just fixing the screen. Our priorities, as instructed from the mayor's office, are recovery of the local economy with a focus on downtown and the economic core, improving public safety and street conditions, reducing homelessness and transforming mental health service delivery, accountability and equity in services and spending. And just highlighting again, required general fund reductions for all city departments, 5% in our first budgeting year in this cycle, fiscal year 23-24, and 8% the next year. Next slide, please. This slide just shows our operating budget versus other programs. So our operating budget, highlighting here, the darker blue, is $226 million, which is about 65% of our total budget, including SFUSD funds and Free City program. Next slide. And of our operating, this is our operating general fund versus self-supporting. So the darkest blue is the children and youth fund, which is about 57% of our operating budget. General fund, 30%. The two others show the student success funding and some grant funding. So the general fund reductions for our department apply to the general fund portion of our funding. So for that reason, our cuts across our total picture are smaller than other departments with a bigger general fund source as their budget. Next slide. Here is the detail, everyone's favorite slide always. This is our budget proposal. I'm going to highlight on the blue side, the expenditures, a few things just for your note. Salaries and fringe benefits, you'll see those under separate lines. We are not proposing any new positions or substitutions, which is a change in position, change in classification. So it's relatively flat other than adjustments based on increases that are built in. We spent a lot of our time last month discussing the city grant program, which is a little more than halfway down. We had in our board approved budget and this current fiscal year, fiscal 22-23, $139.8 million. Last month, when we showed you the base budget, it was showing 130 million, which, based on questions and comments, was concerning. In our department phase, we're showing it back to 150 million here, and I can go into some detail there. The bottom line, though, I want to point out is there's some complexity in kind of a budget snapshot versus CBO funding. So while the city grant program account line in the budget system includes a lot of funding for CBOs, we also have funding for CBOs and other lines, for example, interdepartmental or work orders. And we also see funds that are not CBO funding. So money coming through for the district in some cases is budget under city grant program. So in the next slide, please, I'll go through some of the changes. So 23-24, next year, the first year of the two-year budget cycle submitting, is the last year of our current funding cycle. So our priority is keeping funding for our grantees whole. So we showed the increase back above current year and an increase in the budget snapshot, but regardless, pulling from other sources, our priority is keeping grantees whole through this funding cycle. We are meeting our general fund cut requirements, which again, 5% next year and up to 8% the second year, by finding alternative funding sources for some labor and interdepartmental service costs as our work orders. Again, no new positions or substitutions, so no increase in our labor. And we have been working with the district partners to develop a plan for the newly approved Student Success Fund, Prop G from the ballot. Next slide, please. Addressing the 23-24 city grant program budget gap in the base phase. Again, it's 139.8 in current year. Base budget amount that we presented last month went down to 130, and now we show an increase back to 150.5. So just to highlight that. So when we presented the base budget last month, we had a gap of about 16.8 million in the city grant program line. 6.6 million of that one-time add back, so we were not backfilled. So it's not ongoing funding. Some portion of that was, I believe, passed through to the district. That addresses some of it. JPD work order, we expected that would be renewed for 24 and 25, but the base budget did not reflect those numbers. So this departmental submission shows 4.3 million work ordered funds from JPD for funding there. One-time grant revenues of 3.3 million. And we also pulled in 2.3 million in savings in non-personnel services and fund balance in Children and Youth Fund to increase the amount of expenditure in this area. In addition, this departmental submission reflects a $7 million Craig Start Summer Together. So that would fund July 1st forward activities in this coming summer. And it also reflects 10.6 million Student Success Fund. Again, that's the account line in which we budget these funds for the school district. So again, to highlight the point that the city grant program is not a direct reflection of CBO funding, the Student Success Fund funding there is a prime example. In coming years, as that amount increases, we will see the amount in city grant program increase as the Student Success Fund increases. But again, those funds are sort of a different use. So we'll have to continue to highlight separately from the budget snapshot how we look at CBO funding. And next slide, please. I'll wrap up here and we can go over any questions anyone has, any clarification, and talk more about any of those issues. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Heidi, for this presentation. Let's see, we will start with public comment. Raphael, is there any comment on this item?
We have no public comments.
All right, then public comment is closed. Is there any committee
Sorry.
discussion? Oh,
Here,
sorry.
Jada, can we just give it a second? I just
Yeah.
feel like we move a little too fast. Maybe we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
just, anyone who's like a slow clicker like me,
Mhm.
just to wait a second and see if there are any public comments. Okay. Okay, we can move on now.
Okay. All right. Is there any committee discussion on this item? Okay, Molly, you can go ahead.
Thank you for this presentation. Sorry, I missed it last month, but I have a question about staff. It says you're not hiring and there's no substitutions. Does that mean backfills?
No. So thank you. That's a great question. So we are hiring, but with current labor budget. So our current fiscal year labor budget is the same as next year. We haven't requested any new positions or a substitution in this instance is when you have something like a 9774 and we request to make it a 9775 or a 9772 next year. So we'll have the same positions. We have a number of vacancies now that we are actively filling and we'll continue to do so. So when the mayor's budget instructions came out in December, just highlighting the accountability and equity and services and spending and the required general fund reductions, I clarified again that we would be able to continue to use our existing vacant positions and get those approved. And the focus really is, given the climate, ensuring that we use our vacancies to meet our greatest needs. So in some cases, we may, adjust how teams are configured so that we have adequate staffing. But we received a number of new positions in the current year budget that have not all been filled, and we also will continue to backfill as staff leave. So
Okay, so we get to, and those 977, those numbers, those are just different classifications of staff.
classifications.
Oh, okay, great, good. I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Data, I have one question for Heidi. Is the money that was for crankshaft, is that included in the budget or is that being removed because of the investment stuff?
Sorry, could you repeat the last half of the question again?
No, I was saying, is the crankshaft, is that money added into the budget or is it being removed? Is that part of the general budget or is that separate? Because I know all the behestment payment stuff is that a part of that?
Sure. No, it's a great question. In this budget submission, in our departmental submission, we are including the $7 million grant for fiscal year 24 in this budget submission, which means it will be reviewed, and if the budget is approved, go through that process. We have never included the Crank Start budget in the budget process before for a number of reasons, different history here. But if this moves forward as we hope, it will go through the AAO process and be part of our appropriation. So I hate to bring up last summer's process, but there's some this will be a more straightforward process if we can proceed this way. And in this case, it means you see those funds included in the budget submission here. So the 150.5 million in this case includes $7 million of Crank Start grant funds.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I just clarify a little bit more? So thank you, John, for asking that question, because this, I think, is a very important point for everyone to understand. Moving forward, whenever DCYF fundraises through private foundations or other gifts or donations, we have to go through a process where we present that amount to the Board of Supervisors for their approval before we can actually allocate those funds. And so what we've decided for the Crank Start money is to present the Crank Start money along with the rest of our budget, so that it would just ease the presentations. It'll just reduce the number of presentations. But we will still have to present it as a separate entity. It's not going to be just mushed all together. We still have to talk about how we fundraise for those dollars and what those dollars are for. And so that's going to be for every single time we fundraise any amount of money. But thank you for being mindful about the behested rules, because that is definitely something that we now have to be very, very careful about. So thank you.
And I have one other question, Maria. So for the mayor proposed budget for the 23-24 year, so that means all of the programming for youth this summer, the grantees of those grants are still gonna be funded, right?
So the funding that DCYF provides to nonprofit agencies to run summer programs are all intact. They are the same. Now, what happened in previous summers, so summer 2021 and summer 2022, was that we were able to augment the DCYF funds with the philanthropy dollars. In some cases, so in summer 2021, we received $25 million from Crankstart. And so we were able to allocate those $25 million into our CBOs, into our city department partnerships, so that we could expand services. In 2022, we received $18 million from Crankstart. And now for summer 2023, we are receiving $7 million. Crankstart's desire is to wind down this funding initiative for them as they strengthen up a new funding stream that they want to spend more energy and focus in supporting direct learning loss grants in partnership with nonprofit agencies directly. So for 2023, CBOs are going to see a reduced portion of that philanthropic part of their grant. The DCYF side, the DCYF grant will still stay the same. It's just whatever we were putting on top of that, which is we always called it one-time philanthropic grants. So you'll see a smaller portion for those one-time philanthropic grants for summer 2023.
Maria, there are a couple of questions in chat. One is about the California OAG charity, and the other is about the next funding cycle. I'm happy if you would like to address either. I can address either as a starting point, whatever you'd like.
Sure. So I can start, and Heidi, you can give more of the technical aspects of the California Attorney General's charity trust list. There's a charity registry that the California Office of the Attorney General holds. And our understanding is that last year in 2021, they made an administrative change that required nonprofit agencies to fill out an additional form. And this is where we're finding a lot of our CBOs in this delinquency situation because they didn't fill out that form. And so we're working through that. We just received, actually a couple of days ago, guidance from the Controller's Office and the City Attorney's Office on how we should work with the California Office of the Attorney General's office in monitoring our nonprofit agencies to ensure that they, on an annual basis, fill out this form, and of course, continue to monitor our nonprofit agencies on an annual basis on their financial health, as well as programmatic offerings. And so, Heidi, if you want, can you just explain a little bit more about just the different types of findings that we've been hearing about from the Office of the Attorney General?
Sure. So let's see if I can do this without looking at the memo. We have the three status indicators. One, which I feel like it'll come to you in a minute, means that you're not in compliance. So the form has not been received. It's the incorrect form. The form perhaps has been received, but has not been reviewed and updated. If that happens 2 years running, second status is suspended, and then the third status is revoked when it's more than 2 years. So the citywide process, the Controller's Office has and City Attorney have worked together to issue guidance for all city departments and have pulled the list off the registry of any CBOs with city funding, including ours. We've reviewed them and we'll continue to sort. The majority of grantees are in the first status, which means it's easily correctable. Information, I believe, has possibly already been sent centrally, and we'll follow up with grantees as well, offering support if there are issues, providing the updated form, and also I believe it's likely that we will track, copies of any updated forms that have been submitted in case there's a lag. So you've submitted your form, for example, to the OAG's office, but your registry status has not changed. We can keep a copy of that. So we'll be working out the how to operationalize this, what support to offer grantees, and then we have 2 separate data systems we'll need to maintain our information in, and we'll be reaching out. But as I understand, we have until the end of June, the remainder of the fiscal year, to work through these, and it's only after July 1st when we will have challenges entering into contracts with anyone who is not yet compliant. So it gives us a long period of time to address the issues with each of you, and understanding, of course, that each one needs to be reviewed. For sure, we should monitor compliance. Everyone should be compliant, but in many cases, it's largely an administrative issue and should be relatively easy to correct. As we near the end of the fiscal year, we'll again pull all of the data again, and anyone who's not compliant, I'll be happy to provide for this meeting. The total amount of contracts we'd expect to enter if we could, whatever that looks like, so we can really be data driven and seeing where we are in terms of being able to start next fiscal year, able to contract with all CBOs that we would otherwise contract with. So thanks to everyone for their patience. We're excited that this will be moving along soon. It's taken up a lot of space, but I think we got the guidance last week, and it's very clear how we move forward. So we'll be in touch with everyone. Okay, perfect. And then the second one is a question again about the financial impacts, and then the second year, which is year 1 of the next 5-year funding cycle. Maria.
No, wait. So Madison, is this about the finance? But she says she was also worried about what member Andre was asking.
Yes, I can clarify. We've
Okay.
just been fielding questions from folks just around the negative press around nonprofits from all of the series of articles that were released, and people were wondering if there was any sort of potential financial implications for the next funding cycle because of the negative press, or just general concerns.
Yeah, so there are just a lot of there's been a lot of questions from folks when I tried to fundraise and try to explain what happened with this registry list and how it happened, and how a lot of our CBOs fell into that first delinquency phase. I just feel like once I explain that is how CBOs land in that status, and what the city is now planning to do to monitor this and support CBOs to get out of this and become compliant. I think that there's more understanding that it isn't a huge malfeasance that as what the articles have been claiming, that it's truly an administrative compliance issue. Now, of course, it is still very important for us to fill out forms and to make sure that all of our nonprofit agencies' status are current and that's registered with the state. And as Heidi said, we are working with the city attorney's office and the controller's office to make sure that we build into our monitoring process a way for us to support CBOs to do that. But in terms of the city or DCYF taking any actions based on this registry list, we are not taking any actions in terms of reducing or defunding CBOs. What we are, well, primarily because the CBOs that are on this list are in that first level of delinquency, which is extreme. It's very easily correctable. It literally is, CBOs need to fill out that form and submit it to the registry. But I do think that it is important for us as a city to recognize how crucial CBOs have been in supporting the work of the city and in supporting the safety net that our children and families needed, particularly through the pandemic, but even before the pandemic. So it is very unfair in my mind to paint all of our CBOs in this light. And so it just means that we need to work even harder to change that perception from folks. And Madison, and hopefully all CBOs who are listening to this knows that DCYF is very committed to you and very committed to making sure that we can work together to tell that really great story of all the things that you're doing. And I really ask that you CBOs work with us. So when we ask for data, when we ask for things, to please also to make sure that you provide all that information for us.
All right, is there any further committee discussion on this item?
Hey, Jada, what was the number on that form? Just so that I kept hearing the form, but I didn't hear what number form did.
The form, sorry, what form?
You said the attorney, the form that Maria was just talking about. What's the name of the form, or what's the number of the form?
It's actually your nonprofit status registry. So if you go, it's called Form 990, just to be very technical. So it's Form 990, and then there's an addendum to it. So you would need to fill out both of these forms.
And that's for the city and county, right?
That's for the state of California.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure.
Hello, this is Frederic. Can you hear me?
Yes, Frederic.
Yes.
Hi, sorry, this is Frederic, Service Providers Working Group. We also heard concerns that what the CBOs that were being reported, many of them were the Black-led organizations in the city of San Francisco. And so I'm just wanted to convey that concern. Although it is a technical thing, they were very, folks were not happy about the possible tone of the pieces. So I just wanted to convey that, as well as wonder, is the city going to do anything to counter that narrative?
Well, what the controller's office and the city attorney's office has done is issue guidance to all city departments for us to make sure that we support our CBOs in being in compliance with the state. I can't speak to the reasons why these articles were written.
But I just wanted to make sure that it's been stated.
Thank you for stating that.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this item before we move on? Okay, all right. Thank you again, Heidi and Maria, for fielding questions and the presentation. All right, the next item on the agenda is the SAP update by Amiho. So I'll hand it over to you to present.
Hello, OIC. Thank you, Chair Jada. I'm just waiting for some slides to come up. But while I'm waiting, I'll just say welcome to the new members, and also welcome back to folks who've been with us for some time. We're excited to be able to provide a lot more information for you today. So in the last couple of presentations that I've done, I think that was November and maybe September, we were pretty focused. Ooh, I see a hand.
So sorry, Chair Jada, we actually need to approve the budget. Sorry.
So sorry. So sorry.
We got into
Okay.
deep discussion and conversation.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So going back to item 6 about the budget presentation.
But we
Okay.
never left the item, so.
Right. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve this year's fiscal budget?
So move.
All
I'll
right. Is there a
second.
second? Okay. Perfect. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Rebecca, can you take a roll call vote?
Member Andre,
Aye.
member John,
Aye.
Chair Jada,
Aye.
member Leslie,
Aye.
Vice Chair Molly.
Aye.
The budget is approved.
All right. Okay. Nice. Okay. So so sorry, back to Amiho to go ahead and present on the services allocation plan.
Perfect. That was exactly the time that we needed to get the slides ready. So that worked out just as we had planned it. All right. So once again, hello everyone. My name is Amiho Gomes. I'm the Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives for DCYF, and I'm here to do an update on the services allocation plan. So what I was saying before was that we have given you a lot of sort of very high level basic information about more so how we're going about doing this process. But this time around, I actually want to give a lot more information, a lot more about the what. So I'm going to go into some information about process, but really going to spend most of the time focused on our results framework, which we've done a lot of work on since I was last here. And the real purpose here is just to get you ready for the vote that will be happening, actually, excuse me, for the first draft of the allocation plan that'll come out at the next meeting in April, and then for the vote that will happen at the meeting in May. So this is, sort of building up your foundation of knowledge so that you're ready to go into those meetings prepared. Next slide, please. So since we have new members, I'm going to start us at the top and just make sure that folks are really clear on what we're doing here. So DCYF operates according to a 5-year funding cycle, and that includes these 3 planning phases: the community needs assessment, the services allocation plan, and our request for proposals for 5-year grants. So the CNA, our community needs assessment process, is really about gathering information about needs, experiences, disparities. And that report came out back in 2022. There's a link there. You can click to see it. You can see it on our website. The services allocation plan is essentially allocating resources to address those needs. And then the request for proposals process is the way that we select contractors to actually deliver the services that address those needs. And so you'll note here that we say that equity is our through line. And that's because we actually can say that we start our process really grounded in community voice. We are out there in the community asking folks about their experiences, also looking at data, disaggregated data, and really having a strong sense of how different groups are being affected in the city right now. And then our services allocation planning process is really about directly addressing those needs. And so we are very focused in that way. And we also are working closely with our city partners to try to increase the impact, since we do not work alone on children and youth programming. And then our request for proposals process is really geared towards allowing those agencies who have the ability to actually serve the populations that we know have needs to rise to the top of that process and actually become grantees of the department. So that's how we remain focused on equity and make sure that it is infused throughout all parts of our planning process. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to come back to the timeline here, and I'm going to start at the bottom. So you'll see that we actually are well into compiling and writing the allocation plan, and we actually started our RFP development process back in January. You'll also see that our partner work group process is underway. We actually wrapped up the workforce development one just last Friday. We start with our justice partners tomorrow, and then we will be working around mental health in about mid-March. You'll see that there are 3 convenings here that are upcoming. One of them is actually this Friday. It's with the Juvenile Justice Providers Association. We have a convening next week that we're doing with the Service Provider Working Group, a virtual convening, and then we're also working on an all grantee meeting for sometime in March. And then if you look over in May, we actually are also planning some RFP related technical assistance. I'll talk more about all of those things a little bit later. And we are still on track to release the first draft of the SAP on April 10th. You all will vote on it on May 8th. The Board of Supervisors would vote on it on June 9th. And hopefully, if all that goes to plan, we will release our RFP in July. And then we would look to make award announcements in around March of 2024. So not giving you all the dates in between because we're still developing those, but that is the rough time frame all the way up to the award announcement. Next slide, please. All right, so that's a little bit about kind of what and where we are in the process, but I think what I want to focus us in on here is this slide, which is that we really are using different approaches to try to achieve some different results. I've been with the department for about 11 years. I actually was a grantee for 10 years before that. And I can tell you that in all of my time associated with DCYF, I've seen many CNAs and many of them look very similar. You can actually see that a lot of the needs that were there when I first saw CNA way back in the 90s are still in place. And COVID did change people's lives, but in many ways, it actually just made those existing needs worse, right? More so than it added new needs. And so we recognize that if we want to see some different results in this funding cycle, that we're going to need to do some different things. And that requires us to really be intentional and collaborative. And that doesn't mean that we're not intentional, doesn't mean that we're not collaborative, because we are both of those things, but it's really about how we go about doing that work. Next slide, please. And so that really starts here with the way that we're developing the allocation plan and the RFP. So you'll see in this green box here, the service allocation and RFP work groups. That's a part of a process that we have always done, right? That's about how we understand the CNA findings internally with our staff, identify the gaps, develop and refine our approaches, of course, determine the target populations we really want to focus on, and then develop all the information we need for the RFP. The new thing in this process is these partner work groups. And so we are bringing our partners together very intentionally around specific types of services to help them understand CNA findings as well as ourselves, and then also to develop a shared knowledge of what the landscape looks like, as well as the gaps between our services across departments. We want to align our approaches, and we want to discuss current and ongoing coordination. And we believe that you put those two things together, and it will allow us to be intentional in how we create funding that's going to address CNA findings. And then also that this coordination piece is really going to be the thing that helps us to achieve those better outcomes in the new funding cycle. Next slide, please. And so just going a little bit more into detail here. So this slide is about our coordination efforts. And so you see we have 3 partner work groups and 2 coordination efforts. As I mentioned, the YWD, the Youth Workforce Development Work Group, just ended. And all of these partner work groups are really a series of meetings that we're going through a process with our partners around the things that I mentioned on the last slide, but also some very specific things that are relevant to that type of service. So you can imagine that workforce development has different coordination challenges than our justice partners or mental health. But you can see the partners here. We'll move into justice tomorrow, and then mental health will come after that. We also have a couple of other efforts that we're doing where we're trying to leverage existing work. And so our out of school time work group really came together back during the pandemic. And so we're just going to continue that effort that's already been in place. And then in regards to supports for families, which is kind of a broad area of focus, there are a lot of current efforts that are happening within the city. And we want to try to find ways to both leverage those as well as to kind of find the right lane for DCYF to really focus our efforts. There's a child welfare sort of re-envisioning process that's happening at the Human Services Agency. We still have our partnership with the Department of Early Childhood around family resource centers. So there's different angles for us to take there. And we're still kind of determining what that coordination effort looks like. But overall, I think the key thing here around all these coordination efforts is that DCYF is not just at the table. We are actually convening them. We are actually leading these processes. And that is really the new thing. We have always been collaborative. We've always been at many tables. But during the pandemic, we realized that we have a role at sort of the center to really bring these folks together as the department that's sort of operating in all these different systems. And we are the sort of consistent thing across all of those systems. And we want to lean into that role of really leading coordination and support of the funding that we're putting out. Next slide, please. All right, I want to talk a little bit about our engagement efforts. So as you'll see here, we have multiple engagements coming up. As I mentioned, we start with the JJPA, the Juvenile Justice Providers Association. That'll be on Friday. And then next week, SPWG virtual convening. We're excited about that one. And then the all grantee convening that we're still determining the date for. And really the purpose of all these convenings is partially to share information, allocation plan, RFP, and results, but also to get feedback from folks, to get information from our grantees and from providers who are not our grantees about what their kind of gaps they're facing, kind of how they see themselves aligning with our results areas. Some of the stuff that's very similar to what we've done with you all as well as with our staff. I also mentioned the RFP related technical assistance, and that is a little bit about sort of the general, how do you apply to funding kind of thing, but it's also, and this is really the key part, is that it's more focused on technical assistance to help grantees understand how to apply to our RFP. So really to be strategic about how their services or the services at their agency can help us achieve our results. And then the last thing to point out here is this SAP priority survey that we just actually released last week. So this is actually a very easy, literally 1 minute survey, hopefully 1 minute survey, where we are asking CBOs, children, youth, K and their families, city staff, really anyone to tell us what, how they would prioritize the different services that we fund. And so really just a quick way for us to get a gauge on what people think are most important in terms of the services for children, youth, K and their families. Next slide, please. All right, so that is a lot of the, sort of the what, the where, the how. And now I want to go into a lot more depth about our results areas. And so when we were last here, you guys had a discussion about what sort of was a part of some of these results areas. And we've done a lot of that work internally as well. And so this is really an opportunity to kind of come back to you and show you how that all has played out. All right. And so these are our results areas. Children and youth are supported by nurturing families and communities. Children and youth are physically and emotionally healthy. Children and youth are ready to learn and succeed in school, and youth are ready for college work and productive adulthood. These are the results that we are seeking to achieve in our next funding cycle. They're actually the results that we are seeking to achieve currently, but we have done a lot of work to flesh them out further. Next slide, please. And so it's always good to start with kind of where these things came from. So there are a couple guiding frameworks for these results. Results-based accountability was a key buzzword in our last funding cycle. And that was really the process that helped us generate our results. We used that process to help us flesh out our service areas and also develop those results. And Clear Impact was the entity that helped us do that. We're not exactly using RBA the same way. We realize some of its limitations. We've actually customized it to use it in a way that kind of fits our needs a little bit better, but it still remains the impetus for our results. And then the other framework is the Life Course framework, courtesy of Forward Change Consulting and Arnold Chandler. And that is a framework that really helps us to think about the different services that are needed at different developmental stages. And also, and this is really the crucial part, it helps us to think about services for both on and off track youth, as well as how we've developed the ladders that help young people to come from being off track and get back on track, right? So this framework is really helpful to make sure that we have the right balance of services, not just things that are focused on interventions alone for folks who are off track or things that kind of keep folks on the right track, but the ways to make sure that there is a bridge there and that young people don't just fall into one bucket and have no way to sort of get themselves back on track. So that's been a really helpful framework for us as we've been going into our SAP and RFP development. Next slide. All right, so coming back to this will look familiar to you all, but I think this is a good place to start with these results because all of these results areas overlap. And so I think sometimes that can be a little bit confusing for folks, but this is a way for us to think about how they all work together. And so you'll note that two of the results, children and youth are supported by nurturing families and communities, and children and youth are physically and emotionally healthy, really describe the conditions for children, youth, and their families in their communities, as well as within themselves. And these other two results are really about readiness. And so we believe that if children and youth are supported by nurturing families and communities and are physically and emotionally healthy, then it's possible for them to be ready to learn and succeed in school or ready for college work and productive adulthood. So that's just a way to kind of think about it and sort of conceptualize this as we go into the results themselves. Next slide. Oh, actually, one other thing before we do that, and that is target populations. And so you all may know that DCYF has target populations really for every strategy, every initiative that we fund. And so we're not going to list them all out for you today because there are many, but instead I wanted to give you an overview of how we think about target population in general. And so the Children and Youth Fund requires that all San Francisco children, youth, and their families receive benefit from the fund. But at the same time, the charter also says that those who have the highest needs should receive the most benefit. And so we actually hone in on those groups with concentrated needs and those that have the characteristics of increased needs. And we make sure that that more of our services are targeted to meet those needs. And so you can see who those groups are. The concentrated need groups are our priority populations: African American, American Indian, Alaska Native, Hispanic, Latinx, Pacific Islander, and low-income Asian children, youth, and their families. Also families economically impacted by COVID and individuals with disabilities and their families. And then the characteristics of increased needs really describe characteristics that obviously often overlap with our concentrated need groups. I'm not going to read them all, but you can see that there are some key ones here: foster youth, justice-involved young people, teen parents, children of incarcerated parents. There's a range of different characteristics, and we want to make sure that we have services that can address all of those needs. So that's kind of how you can think about, how we sort of hold all three of those target populations at the same time. All right, next slide. All right, so now we're going to get into these results. So we'll start here with, excuse me, children and youth are supported by nurturing families and communities. Next slide, please. And so what I'm going to do with each one, I'll give you a description. I will talk about the ages that this result encompasses. And then I will talk about our lanes. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And then the next slide will describe the current services that have a primary impact on this result. All right, so when we're talking about children and youth are supported by nurturing families and communities, those are associated with programs, resources, supports, and activities that increase the ability for families to nurture their children and for communities to be safe, connected, and engaged. And we see that as covering all the age ranges: 0 to 5, 6 to 13, 14 to 17, and 18 to 24. Now, one thing that we did is we developed a conception of what our lanes are, right? And the idea here is that there is some work that DCYF does on our own. There's a lot of work that we do with our partners, and then there are things that are just completely out of our lane. And so we wanted to make sure that we had some clarity about that as we think about these results, because they are not going to be achievable simply by DCYF alone. All right, so you'll see that in this result, in our lane, caring adults and social emotional learning. I'm just going to call those out first because you're going to see them in every result. Those are actually the bread and butter of most of the programs that DCYF funds. But there are other things here as well: community building and engagement, community events and activities, family support programs, and access to resources. We do a lot of things with partners: childcare with the Department of Early Childhood, Family Resource Centers also with DEC, Child Welfare is a human services agency, resources for basic needs. I won't read the whole list, but I will also note that you'll see that violence prevention and response is here, but services for justice-involved youth actually lives in a different result area. And I'll explain that in a little bit. I just wanted to make that distinction. What's not in our lane here: public safety. We are not the police, we're not the DA, and we're not the public defender. And we are not allowed to actually use the Children and Youth Fund to build or buy housing, right? So obviously we know that housing is a huge need for children, youth, and their families, but we cannot use the fund to buy those properties. However, as you can see, we can support the families in partnership with those departments that do acquire housing to make sure that they have their needs met. And that is actually our lane in regards to housing. Next slide, please. All right, so on this side, you see that we have the current services with primary impact. I want to make one key point here. These are our current services. This does not represent our RFP for the next funding cycle, but we wanted to make sure that folks could understand kind of how it all fits based on the current set of services. And so you'll see here that each service area is the white text, and within each service area, you can have funding strategies that we fund directly, initiatives that we fund, and then partnerships, which usually involve us sending money to another department to implement some services together. So in this result area, in family empowerment, we fund our community collaboratives here. That's our Black to the Future, Roadmap to Peace, programs like that. Our initiatives are the Safe and Sound Talk Line, and then we have our Family Resource Center partnership here. In Justice Services, our Street Violence Intervention Program, which is a partnership with DPH, is here. Our mentorship funding strategy. And then for outreach and access, our 415, which you heard about in the last meeting, is here, as well as our resource fair work. And you can also see that there's a link here. There's links on multiple slides, but there's a link here to a service area guide that will provide a lot more information about each one of these things. Next slide, please. All right, next up, children and youth are physically and emotionally healthy. Next slide. And that's associated with programs, resources, supports, and activities that promote physical, emotional, behavioral, and mental health, as well as healing from trauma. And we see that as covering all the age ranges. Once again, in our lane, caring adults, social emotional learning, CBO-based sports and wellness programs. We are not the only ones that do sports and wellness programs, but we do them directly with CBOs. And so you'll see that distinction because you also see wellness and physical fitness programs are something we do in partnership with Rec and Park and the Department of Public Health. This is also where our mental and behavioral health work will happen, healing and trauma, food and nutrition, and our health education programs. And what we do not do here is we do not do primary and dental care. Next slide, please. In terms of the current services with primary impact in emotional well-being, that's our Black African American Mental Health Initiative partnership with DPH. The TAY system of care is also here. And then of course our wellness initiative. In terms of the strategies that we're funding in enrichment, leadership, and skill building, it's our sports and physical activity strategy. And then in justice services, intensive supervision and clinical support. And then lastly, in outreach and access, our nutrition programs. Next slide, please. Next up, children and youth are ready to learn and succeed in school. Next slide. That's associated with programs, resources, supports, and activities that provide opportunities for youth to learn, gain social emotional learning skills, engage educationally, and have access to needed supports. And the ages here are 0 to 5, 6 to 13, and 14 to 17. In terms of what's in our lane here, caring adult social emotional learning, of course, and then CBO-based OST, academic support, and enrichment programs. Once again, we're not the only ones doing those, but we do it directly with our CBOs. And as you can see, we have many partnerships here. Much of it is with SFUSD, as you would imagine. And there's a range of things here, but also our early care and education programs, our partnership with the Department of Early Childhood is here, and then some other things with SFUSD. In terms of what's not in our lane, we do not run TK to 12 public schools. And of course, we don't do school transportation as well. Next slide. In terms of the current services with primary impact, this is where our early care and education funding lives, our early learning scholarships with DEC. Educational supports is here. So that's our academic supports and literacy supports funding strategies, our initiatives, summer transitions, and truancy assessment and resource center. Our enrichment, leadership, and skill building strategies are here as well. Arts, identity formation, STEM, and service learning. And then out of school time is also here. So our beacon and comprehensive year-round and summer, our Summer Together initiative, and then our equitable access partnership. Next slide. And then lastly, youth are ready for college work and productive adulthood. Next slide. It's associated with programs, resources, supports, and activities that help youth and TAY gain exposure, skills, and abilities that prepare them for successful transitions into adulthood. And as you would imagine, we are focused on 14 to 17 and 18 to 24 within this result. So within our lane, caring adults, social emotional learning, CBO-based college prep, justice-involved youth programs, and then our youth empowerment programs, which is the youth empowerment allocation. So as I noted, the justice-involved youth programs live here, mainly because we want to recognize that those programs are mostly focused on trying to get young people to productive adulthood. We also want to be focused on community safety, and that lives in our nurturing communities result area. In our lane here with partners, our youth workforce development programs, of which we do with SFUSD, OEWD, and the Human Rights Commission, our career-oriented education, undocumented youth programs, higher education, foster youth, and financial empowerment. And what is not in our lane is career employment. We run the programs that prepare young people for career employment, but we do not actually run programs that offer career employment. Next slide. And then in terms of the current services with primary impact, we have educational supports programming here. You'll note that some of these are the same, and that's just to acknowledge that in our current funding, some of our strategies have target populations that include TAY, as well as other ages, right? So for those where you have TAY, you're gonna see that they show up here as well. So in educational supports, we have academic supports and alternative education. We have our initiatives, Free City College, Summer Transition, and the Truancy Assessment and Resource Center, known as TARC. Enrichment, leadership, and skill building strategies. Most of them are here: arts and creative expression, identity formation, STEM, service learning, youth leadership, engagement, and organizing, and youth-led philanthropy. And then all of our justice services strategies are here, as well as our initiative. So cultural programming, detention-based, girls and young women's programming, multi-service, and young adult court case management, as well as the Community Assessment and Referral Center, which is CARC. Next slide, please. And then last two, mentorship, connective services, and then all of our youth workforce development funding is here as well. So career awareness, high school partnerships, and youth workforce development, as well as MAEP, opportunities for all, SF Youth Works, and then our partnership with the Rec and Park Department to fund work creation. Next slide, please. All right, that was a lot, whole lot, and we have a whole lot, so that makes sense. So what I want to actually ask you to do now is to just discuss a little bit the same question that we are actually asking folks at our engagement, same question we ask our own staff, and that is, what are the gaps in services and systems that you're seeing for children, youth, TAY, and their families in San Francisco relative to these results? I think it's really key and important for us to be able to have a sense of what those gaps are, because it definitely impacts our planning, especially with our partners. So it's really helpful to get a sense from different standpoints, different viewpoints, different constituencies of what those gaps look like. So I would love to hear from you all about what some of those gaps are that you're seeing.
Jada, are we allowed to go, or do you want to go to the public first, or what's just a process question?
Yeah,
want to speak out of turn.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Do we have to take public comment before we can discuss? Yeah, okay.
I don't think this is a voting item, so this is a discussion item, so we can take it in any way we want. I do see a hand. I see Bill's hand on the community side, on the public comment side.
Okay.
Was I unmuted? Yeah.
Yep, you're unmuted.
Okay, so thank you for that presentation. That was a ton of information in a very quick amount of time. One thing, I know you can't put everything in our lane because it would fill up the box, but I think you sold OST programs a little short by not including them in the first two, supporting, nurturing communities and families, and the second one as well, physically and emotionally healthy. Because as you all know, the after-school programs are not just academic programs. They're enrichment, they're recreation, they're emotional, they're family support. And I really do think you might have just sold us a little short. So that's my only comment. Excellent, excellent work.
And you know what, I think I'm glad you made that comment, because that is the conversation. I mean, to be honest with you, all of our services contribute really to all of our results. And what I actually didn't share was a whole bunch of slides that show all the services that have a secondary impact on each result. And it's like the entire list. And so we definitely are aware that, you know, a lot of our programs, a lot of our providers do more than just sort of the prime focus of what their work is, because that's what it requires to work with youth and their families. You know, but for the purposes of this exercise and the need for us to classify things in certain ways, that's really why we've put them in certain places. But we spent a lot of time talking about this, and we, you know, expect there to be some differences of opinion about that. But I will say we definitely do not, we are definitely not underselling OST programs, because they are our largest area of focus, and we know just how important they are. But, you know, just to note that there is a little, there's always room for debate over what goes where, and how to actually do that. And this is the way that we've landed for this process. But thank you for that comment.
I just want to make sure that our new members know what OST stands for. So any new member should ask a question about letters that come out of people's faces, because I know that can get confusing. And there's a lot of letters, kind of acronyms on here, but OST is out of school time.
All right, any other committee discussion?
I mean, there's so much on here that if the gaps, I feel like you guys have addressed the major gaps, especially learning a lot from what's come out post pandemic and the academic supports and just safety, et cetera. So I really appreciate that you guys have covered a lot of, and always have, I should say, the breadth of the work of the department has been really broad and impactful. And so I don't have anything to comment on the gaps, but what I do want to say is I love how you guys have structured this. I appreciate the lanes. I think you guys do so much and support so much for our children, youth, and families that I appreciate the lanes and saying what's not in our lane. Because I think despite my comments about the breadth of work, it does give focus, right? So for all of us, members of the public, like, why aren't you building housing for our families, or providing healthcare for our children, and so I think that that's really clarifying and emphasizes focus on this. I also, just because I've been here for a while, I appreciate how you pause and you're taking a different approach and challenging yourselves to look at the data differently and present it and speak to it in a different way. So I really appreciate that, because it is true, you don't want to be complacent. We got to, make sure that we're creating the positive impact that we're all here to support. So I love that. And most importantly, I am so proud to be a part of this group that is taking the lead on convening and bringing people together and coordinating all of this. As you've presented, there's a ton of partners, a lot of CBOs for the, like was just mentioned, for the out of school time programs, but you guys have always, I wouldn't say it's just because of the pandemic, but you guys have always been conveners and leaders in bringing groups together, especially the other city departments together for coordination to create even more positive impact for our community. But I think that was kind of revved up with the pandemic, and DCYF was kind of implicitly expected to take that leadership role, and you guys ran with it really, really well. And so glad to see that that's continuing, because that's been an issue for a while before, as the lack of coordination and disparate services. And then what does that mean to how we're actually creating impact for our community if everybody's kind of running like this, whereas like, let's come together and stay focused and do what we do best in each other's lanes, right? So we're not duplicating and therefore not creating as much and being effective with our impact capabilities. So I just want to say that this whole presentation makes me very happy as somebody who's been around for a while, to see the evolution of the department and how you're looking at all this. So I think it's really exciting. So thank you.
All right, is there any other committee discussion on this item? Okay, I just wanted, yeah, I completely agree with everything Molly said. I think this was a really good report to clearly make a distinction between what is DCYF doing versus what we do in partnerships, and then what is just not in our lane, which leads to one of my questions, which is, how do you see the OAC engaging in the convening processes, if that's something that was thought about?
That's a good question, actually. I think it's helpful for you all to hear what's happening in these meetings. When you ask the question about what gaps folks are dealing with, you're going to get a broad set of answers, which is the purpose. To try to create a space for our constituents, which is, in many cases, the most interested constituents around the allocation plan is our grantees and providers. And so having a good sense from them about what the challenges are that they're facing, and not just in community, but I think the in-system part is really key, really adds that context. Because there is a lot that it takes for us to be effective in terms of, the services that grantees are provided. They don't happen in isolation. And so the need for the coordination piece is really crucial. And my belief is that we have to create the conditions that allow our grantees to be effective. And so in order for us to really understand what those conditions are, I think it's helpful to be able to hear them. And that's part of the reason why we are doing this process. So I think on the most basic of levels, it's really that, is being able to really understand it in a deeper way from the folks who are really dealing with these challenges right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And the other question that I had, it was, I saw this in the, really quickly when you were presenting. What is the TAY system of care that's partnered with DPH?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the DPH actually started its own sort of system for TAY to carve them out from their youth, to ensure that they have like clinics that are specifically for TAY, that they have, actually they have some workforce development opportunities where they're trying to get TAY to become workers within their system. They have training opportunities. So it's really to sort of focus in the health system on TAY and the needs that TAY have, as well as the settings and the approaches that are going to be most effective in dealing with TAY. And I think just to pull out a key learning in that is that the fact that exists calls out the need for TAY to have things that are customized to them, right? I mean, we see the same thing in some of our funding where folks think that I can just sort of adapt my program for TAY, but it doesn't quite work because there are these other elements that have to be put in place when you're dealing with a young person who is in it. They're right there dealing with the stuff that's happening in their life. In some cases, things are unstable, or there's some disconnection that's there, and their services really have to take that into account. And so I think the TAY system of care really was thinking about that in regards to the healthcare system. And so it's kind of a natural partnership for us to be able to support those efforts, and also just because they are doing so many things with it. It's not just healthcare, it's also, a developmental piece around workforce development and training.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that caught my eye. That's really good to hear. Okay, thank you. I think we can go ahead and just do a formal public comment just to make sure that there's no further comment before we move to the next item. So, Raphael, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments.
Okay. All right. So thank you again, Amijo. This was a really robust and overall just great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is the report of the Service Provider Working Group. So I will hand it over. I know Frederic is on and Madison. I will hand it over to you both.
Hi, everyone. Frederic actually had to drop. She's getting her car towed right now. So lots of fun stuff for her. She did join for the first part, but it will be me giving the update today. One question that I have is, I have a question about the budget. Do I have to give my whole update and then have Maria respond at the end, or am I allowed to ask it and have Maria respond right now? I never know with the discussion versus public comment versus, does anyone know?
I don't think we're super formal. I mean, you are part of the agenda items, so I think you can, why don't you ask and then I can
see how. Okay. So I just, obviously that was, the budget presentation was a lot super quick, and I was just reviewing the slides as we were going through the other updates as well. And I just wanted to clarify, because this will be a question we get from our membership, that you guys are not projecting any sort of deficit now. Is that correct? Because you had the 16.8 gap for sure deficit in the last meeting.
Yeah.
9.9 of that was backfilled, which leaves 6 million, about little like 6.9 million remaining, but that's all the other stuff that you talked about with one-time funding sources and all of that. So there's no projected deficit in your guys' budget right now.
Not right now.
Okay.
No. And I can speak a little bit more, maybe I can just tease it up, but no. So right now we're not projecting a budget deficit. We are working with the mayor's office on trying to find funds to continue the CODB that we provided nonprofit agencies. Once again, I just want to be super, super clear. DCYF is keeping the DCYF grant that we have given to everyone whole. And we are going to have these very hard conversations with other city departments and other contracts that we have that are not nonprofit agencies to reduce those contracts instead.
Great, thank you. I just also wanted to be very clear because I wanted to be able to say that with confidence. That's very exciting and great news. And I think along those same lines, and I mentioned this when we were talking about the budget before too, like that people definitely have concerns around like the negative narrative that is coming out around nonprofits because of that delinquency status and all of that. And especially in thinking about, I know you guys were working on doing private fundraising for Summer Together, and I'd imagine those conversations are impacted by those articles as well. And so I'm assuming there's no kind of update. I know you guys don't have any private funds like dedicated in your budget right now, but folks are wondering if there's any update there and any sort of support or partnership that your department would like from grantees and service providers in countering that negative narrative. We would be happy to tap in. We had folks talking about we should write a counter article and things like that. So if there are ideas about that, we have people who are ready and happy to speak up and kind of share the reality of the story. For most folks, like you said, it was a piece of paper and it wasn't kind of the narrative that a lot of people are hearing. So beyond that, you all know it takes a long time to build infrastructure and bylaws and develop all of those governance documents. So we have been working on that over the last couple of months, really getting closer to having some finalized products, hopefully by next month in terms of our governance structure and our bylaws as well. We're excited to have DCYF join us next week for our service allocation planning special session with our membership. We have folks who are not current DCYF grantees who are very interested in attending that session and giving input like you all just got the opportunity to do. So looking forward to that. And then the last portion is in our last meeting, we gave an update on the Student Success Fund. And folks had questions just around the process that DCYF is leading around assessing community needs and kind of getting insight into what those funds can and should be used for. So we actually had one of our members who was interested in calling in and giving public comment today. So Ephraim, if you are here, please raise your hand and they will take you off mute. And he just wanted to give context to what his organization was doing related to those funds. And then generally the question, Maria, after that is just kind of how can folks help participate in that process and help contribute to your guys' data collection process around assessing needs and how those funds can be used.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madison. Good afternoon. Hi, Maria. It's good to see you again. Hello, everyone. I'm Ephraim Barrera. I work for Meta, and I'm also a part of the Latino Task Force Collective. And so as Madison said, during the last Service Providers Working Group meeting, we heard, updates in terms of, the sort of the next iteration around sort of what's happening around the planning of the implementation of Prop G or the Student Success Fund. And I did share that at the sort of the community level, there's this significant desire to really elevate and center the needs of the families, the students that we represent across, our collective. And so as such, we have taken on the task of going to community and essentially asking them, what are the needs that you see that should be funded out of this amazing grant opportunity? And so our plan is to continue to gather, that very valuable feedback from the families, from the students, and to really compile it into, sort of priority areas of funding priorities that is represented by the folks that we're serving in our capacity as service providers. And so we obviously welcome the feedback. We're super excited about and the response by the way from our families is very, very positive. They know that public education definitely deserves more funding, and so they're really excited that the city is really stepping up and it is joining forces with our school district to make this our key schools whole in terms of funding. But with that said, our membership is definitely very interested in knowing what are sort of the next the next iteration of the implementation plan for Prop G. We want to partner with you. We want to hopefully influence ultimately how the implementation of this amazing grant will happen. And so what are the spaces where we can get plugged in, where we can bring in this community lens so that again our students, the families that we're serving on day to day actually ultimately benefit from these amazing resources. So, thank you.
Okay, all great questions. Anything else, Madison, that
Nope, that's it. You can go ahead and respond.
Okay, great. So let's see. So let's start with, once again, budget, no budget cuts to nonprofit agencies. DCYF's core funding will continue. Of course, no guarantees on the philanthropic portion of your funds. And we are still working with the mayor's office around continuation of the MCO dollars, the cost of doing business funding that CBOs receive on an annual basis. Which I do definitely feel positive that we might get to a place where we can all agree that we'll be able to find the resources for this. So stay tuned. Second thing, or the second item that you asked regarding just how do we work together to really promote and talk about the benefit of having such a powerful nonprofit system and community in our city, and the work of nonprofit agencies and service providers, and how this, what we've called in the past our army of essential service providers, really came to the call of the city and provided all these essential services for our children, youth, and families. How do we promote that? I think that's something that, Dory and we think about all the time. So I think if you have ideas, let us know. I know that we really do want to find ways to talk about nonprofit agency and nonprofit work. We have the calendar, our annual calendar that we promote CBOs. We try to promote CBOs via our social media platforms. We highlight CBOs in a lot of different initiatives or efforts that we do. But I do agree that there has to be a place where we, the city, and either that's a DCYF-led effort or multiple city department effort, where we say our CBOs are valued partners in this work. And I think many of you have heard me say that my opinion is that CBOs are truly an extension of what we do in the city. And it's really important for us to come together and change this narrative. I've been thinking for the last hour about what Frederique asked and her comments around, why are all these CBOs that were delinquent on this list, CBOs who serve children of color or who are led by people of color. And, I think the question for us is to really think about how do we break a lot of that, a lot of these structural forces that create policies that put our CBOs in these situations. I think it's really important as government officials for us to to really think about when we come up with policies, how will that impact our community? And how do we make sure that the things that we ask our CBO partners to do, that we provide the supports for them to do those things. So I think these are all the really important questions that we need to do, and what DCYF, we are ready to work with you to support you on trying to promote not only yourself, but really promote the work that you are doing for the city, and in partnerships with us. So definitely looking forward to more conversations, looking forward to working together on that. And it is unfortunate that we are in this space that we are in, where there is a lot of this negativity, but I do think that there's an opportunity for us to change that narrative. And I think it's going to be very easy for us to change that narrative. And then finally, speaking of changing narratives, you know, like we were able in the city to pass this dedicated fund for children's services. So it is kind of strange for us where on one hand, we talk about all the negativity of CBO partners, and yet we say, yes, we want more. So once again, I really do believe that we can change this negative framework, but I really do think the work is maybe a little bit more upstream, is to really change policy. So I think that's something that we should work together on. Okay, so for Prop G, the Student Success Fund. So DCYF leadership and myself have met with school district leadership several times already in thinking about how we map out and plan out the rollout of the Student Success Fund. For those of you who are not aware or familiar, the Student Success Fund was just passed in the last election, and it will provide DCYF up to $60 million of funds to support schools to move towards programs and efforts to address learning loss and social emotional supports for students and families. It's very school-based. The framework that a lot of people think about when we talk about these things is called community schools, but all it means is that we want to bring programs and services into the schools to support the school community. And because it is very school focused, we need to work very closely with our school district. And so over the last several months, the superintendent and I have been talking about different ways for us to build up the school's capacity to really implement a framework like a community schools framework, or a framework that is just open and welcoming to service providers on school site, and to lift up the gaps that they see on school sites, like any type of literacy gaps that they have, or gaps towards math proficiency, or high school graduation. So those are the conversations that we're having with the superintendent right now. We're trying to plan out and map out a way for us to allocate the first round of funding that will come into the department, which is only $11 million. So first round would be $11 million for year one. And for year two, DCYF will receive $35 million. Year three, $45 million. And then year four, we'll get up to the full $60 million. But as you can imagine, getting a school up to a level or a place where they feel that they can provide this wraparound services and meet the whole child needs takes a lot of time. And so what we're working with the school district on is trying to get a good landscape of all the schools that are interested in becoming a community schools, or a school that was welcoming to lots of different services. And then really honing in on building the family infrastructure. So the ways that you're actually what Efrain has been talking about, the way that you really promote and support parents to really take ownership over their children's education career, to help parents really understand all the nuances of what it takes, to build a school budget, or their voice and their place in advocating within that school for their child, but then also for the type of services that they see fit to serve that community. So that's the work that we've been doing. Actually, I was just talking to one of the supervisor's office. I think the superintendent and I would be more than happy to talk pretty soon, maybe in the end of March or early April, about the rollout plan for these funds and the process for how we will allocate these funds. But right now, we don't have a public plan yet because we're still in discussions and negotiations.
I was waiting to see if Ephraim was able to respond or not. I think what our membership is looking for is an opportunity to give feedback. I know it's a ton of work that goes into what you guys are trying to develop now, and it's simultaneous with your service allocation plan as well. So I understand you guys have a lot of spaces that you're trying to collect community input. So I think if there's some opportunity for our membership to be able to give feedback on that plan and make sure that there's space for folks to potentially identify gaps from the work that you all have done, if there's any that come up, I think that would be great. I think folks just want to have the opportunity to have voice in reviewing it. Ephraim, I don't know if you're still there, if you can still speak, but.
Yeah, and I just want to say, absolutely. Sorry, Ephraim, absolutely. And I really do believe the place and space for community feedback will be through the school engagement. So when the school community, so once again, I firmly believe it has to be led from the school community. So when the school community convenes these community meetings, I do believe that's the place where CBOs can come in and talk about all the different services that they can provide to families. Sorry, Ephraim.
No, thank you. Thank you, Director. So I think, yeah, no, that's very helpful. Definitely gives us a, more insight in terms of what is that process, that rollout process that you're discussing. But to Madison's point, I think it is also important to understand ultimately what goes into play as far as how the site allocations are routinely decided, which I understand, right, is obviously working in alongside the district in terms of figuring out those schools that and the readiness level that those sites will have in order to be able to actually apply and receive, ultimately, hopefully receive the grants so that there is success. But I think what we're hearing from our community is what is going to go into that decision sort of making process that will ultimately only allow X number of sites, because 11 million we've heard is not going to be 11 sites. More likely it's going to be less than 11 potentially. So out of, I don't know how many schools we have, like 80 something, right? Like that is
No,
not.
we have 120 schools.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, a lot of
right.
schools.
So it's a lot of schools, and for the sort of the first rollout, the first cycle is very, very few schools will be sort of in the pipeline ready to even apply. So I think there's also sort of that level of interest, right? And then part of that, I guess, understanding the process, understanding how ultimately those sites will be identified. And I know, again, it's not DCYF, it's the school district, it is in tandem, right? But for us as communities to really kind of have that level of insight in terms of what are the indicators that you're taking into account? What is the data that is informing ultimately the sites that will be eligible to apply? Because in essence, that's what our families are telling us, right? It's like, is my school ultimately going to be selected? We don't know, right? Or even when you look at neighborhood, right? Because we have footprint in multiple neighborhoods. We're hearing a lot from the Excelsior and how in many instances their sites have actually been left out in many ways. And so they're really concerned that, again, if we have an equitable process, if we really understand sort of the context, the historical context, and seeing what are the sort of the community needs, what are the historical sort of investments by neighborhood, there's definitely a lot of interest in really that. And then lastly, it's really around the data, right? So as we said, we are gathering very valuable data. We look forward to really having the space to present this data at the at the board level, at the board of supervisor level, so that we can sort of provide that insight from the folks out in on the ground, really informing the process. So that was the other point. But thank you for giving us that insight.
Absolutely. And I agree with all of your points. I agree. I think that readiness is key in all of this. Readiness to like roll up your sleeves to do the work, but it's really about readiness, like the infrastructure's ability to absorb the dollars. We've seen over and over and over where we send monies into for different initiatives where it's the initiative doesn't have the infrastructure nor the capacity to absorb those dollars, and the initiative fails, and then of course we end up blaming the community. And I just don't think that that's fair, and that's not right. And I think that we need to do a better job on the front end to prepare and to really support and build that infrastructure first, so that we can be successful, knowing that we'll have iterations, but it's much better when everyone is ready for it. But I understand that there is, of course, a desire to move fast, balancing with desire to do it right. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. That is our update and our question and answer session, which I appreciate your guys' flexibility with letting us go back and forth.
Of course.
All right, thank you, Madison, for that report. Rafael, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments.
All right, then public comment is closed. Is there any comment from the committee on this report? All right, Molly, go ahead.
Yeah, I just say, Madison, if you want, going to your bylaws and your governance documents, if you need any support from me on that, or another eye to look at stuff, just email me. You know how to get a hold of me. Just let me know. I'm happy to help.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, any other comments? Okay, all right, thank you again, Madison. All right, the next item is the report of the DCYF director. So Maria, I'll hand it back over to you to report.
Perfect. I have an administrative report, which I can provide first because it's very administrative and boring. And then I would love to end on some really wonderful positive things, which falls in line with us promoting nonprofit agencies and how wonderful our community is. So first, I want to share that our city attorney has released guidance for all policy bodies. It's in your packet regarding remote participation for policy bodies such as ours. And fortunately, the OAC falls under these mandated policy bodies that was exempt back during the pandemic from meeting in person, and pretty soon at the end of February, when the governor's declaration of state of emergency ends, and then the mayor, of course, will follow that termination of the declaration of emergency. All of these policy bodies will have to revert back to the original rules, which means we have to go back to in-person meeting. And so right now, we are looking at different locations for where our OAC can meet. Not worst case, but if we can't find anything else, we will meet at DCYF's office in the Mint room, which many of you know. And for those who don't know, we can definitely give you a little tour. But we will meet in the Mint. We will have hybrid options for members of the public who cannot participate in person, and they, due to an accommodation request, can participate remotely. And so we will also have IT capabilities so that we can then have a hybrid meeting. We've already been testing out this capability for a number of DCYF meetings already. So it's pretty cool. We have a tool, a little thing called the owl that we place in the middle of the table, and it has these cameras that's all around it. And so you can sit around a table and you can have your picture on all the screens. So it's pretty amazing that you can have these hybrid meetings now relatively easy. But I do want to just let everyone know, starting March 1st, we will have to, we won't meet in March, we're meeting in April. But in that April meeting, we will be meeting in person. And we will have the hybrid capability if we have any members of the public who request an accommodation from us. In the memo that I shared in the packet, it lists out all the different rules around the Sunshine Ordinance. All of that is now coming back and will be fully enforced, as well as all the Brown Act rules will be fully enforced. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody here hears that and knows that. If you have any questions, please reach out to myself or to Rebecca. Rebecca and Dory actually went to the training that was provided by our city attorney, so they are well versed on this. But it's great that we are at this phase of the pandemic life where we are now back to in person again. So it's actually a good thing. Molly, do you have a question about this?
Yeah, I just have a question regarding just a question that has been a refrain for us when we were meeting in person is the availability of childcare, in particular for our members. I'm not sure the need, but for our members so they can participate since they're required.
Yes, we have definitely kept that in the forefront of our minds as we think about space. Once again, DCYF's office, the Mint, is not the ideal space, as we've shown in pre-pandemic times. We are looking into other options. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but the Twitter Nest, which was the space that we were using on the ground floor of Fox Plaza, that they are no longer in operations. They closed during the pandemic, and unfortunately, Twitter has decided to no longer fund that program to support children and families. So we no longer have access to that space. So we are looking for different options right now. So thankfully for us, we have until April before our next meeting. So we have a little bit longer runway to figure this out. Leslie, do you have a question?
I did, yes, thank you. Sorry to hear about the Twitter Nest. First of all, former Twitter employee here. I did a lot of volunteer work at the Nest. It was a great space, so I'm sad that it's no longer available. I did want to ask and just get a point of confirmation. You mentioned around what sound like some really great accessibility options for folks that are not able to attend in person. Are those only available upon request, or will those be available regardless of sort of plan in case people aren't able to request them ahead of time and decide to participate?
So the remote options are only available for members of the public, and members of the public can inform us as late as 15 minutes before the meeting starts. So technically we just have to be ready. We just have to be ready and have those options available. So when a member of the public says, so even when we put out the agenda, we will have to put the link to the remote option for members of the public who would like to join that way.
Okay,
Dory,
great.
misspeaking in any way?
Okay, sorry. It's also for members of the committee who have a disability and are unable to attend. They can apply for accommodation from DHR.
Thank you for that. I was specifically just asking for the public, you know, thinking about all of the great conversation that we've had and knowing that folks want to be as involved as they can be. How can we make things as widely accessible as possible? So thank you for this great work.
Yeah. Any other questions about that? Oh, Skylar, sorry.
Hi, so the thing is that I am a student, so I don't get on to 350. How would that work out for me and Ryan?
Right. Thank you for bringing that up. We actually, Chair Jada and Vice Chair Molly, we actually have been discussing the start time for these meetings as well. So pre-pandemic, our meetings used to start around 5:30 or 6 o'clock to accommodate for our student members. So I think we have to go back to that as well. So most likely we will have to start later to accommodate for members to drive or get to the location of the meeting. So we'll probably meet around 5:30 or 6 o'clock.
Yeah, we should also, since we have the luxury of a little bit of time, get feedback from our youth members about transportation to the meeting. I'm happy to pick people up. And so just wanting to make sure that it's easy for them to participate. So we can talk about that more in the executive subcommittee.
Okay, so stay tuned for more information, more emails from Rebecca to survey time, also to inform you of new locations for our next meeting in April. So thank you for that. And then finally, I just wanted to let everyone know this past Saturday had a fantastic summer resource fair over at Golden Gate Park in the County Fair building. It was amazing. The pictures that we saw scrolling on the screen earlier, that's the flyer for it. But Rebecca, do we have pictures? Oh, here we go. I kid you not, we had traffic going all the way down Martin Luther King Drive and 9th Avenue, because families were all going into the park. I saw families scootering in, walking in, biking in. It was amazing. Within the first hour of the summer resource fair, we already had 1,000 families that went through our doors to then talk to over 100 summer camp providers, many nonprofit agencies, private camp providers, our rec and park partners, and of course, all these lovely pictures of our partners at the library. Yes, so it was a very dense, so that's us. It was such a joyous experience where it felt really pre-pandemic happy. Lots of families, lots of activities, and hopefully a lot of families got to, and that's our member, Aaron. Aaron was actually tabling for Department of Public Health, his boss. But hopefully a lot of families got to see all the different summer camp options that was available to them in the city. And hopefully a lot of them got to register for some of these camps, so that kids this summer will have a fantastic, again, summer experience. You know, once again, just so grateful for the partnership with all of our CBOs, and Rec and Park really came in deep and were amazing. And the library partners brought in the mobile bookmobile, and just had tons and tons of things for kids to do and tons of activities. And finally, I just cannot thank our staff enough for showing up this day, for volunteering, and just working really hard to make Saturday such a successful day. Particularly Emily Davis from our communications team. She negotiated all the location, all the conversations with our nonprofit agencies, all the private camps, the partners with Rec and Park and the library, and with Department of Public Health, who did a vaccination pop-up, where we actually had families who were like, oh, they're doing flu shots. Okay, I'll go get my flu shot. And oh, they have COVID vaccines. They had TTAP vaccine. They had a whole bunch of vaccines, and families just came, got their vaccines, got their, signed up for summer camps, hung out in the park. The sun was out. It was just a lovely day. And I thank Emily Davis for all of that. And of course, Dory and the rest of the team. But that's it. That's how, I think more of that is what's going to make our city a great place to grow up, but it also will make the rest of the city and people who question the work that we do at DCYF and the work that CBOs do, and see that we just, we really rock. We really do help make children's lives better. So thank you everyone for showing up on Saturday, and thank you everyone for going to be running a great, fantastic summer camp this summer. Yay. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. It's so nice to see pictures, because I remember right before the pandemic we have the summits. So to see something on this scale again, and like so many people, it's so nice. It's so nice.
Yes. Yeah, well, we have 300 pictures, so I don't know how we're gonna share it with everybody, but this is like, this is all we're gonna sing for a while.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Raphael, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments at this time.
Okay. Is there any comment from the committee on Maria's report? All right. Okay. Thank you again, Maria. All good news. And again, more to hear on meeting in person. Okay, so we are at item 10, which is action items and adjournment. Are there any action items that I may have missed? I don't have anything down for action items, things to return to in April.
Well, we'll bring.
Oh, I was just saying, just what you just mentioned, Jada, is that we'll work out some of the logistics for an in-person meeting. Talk further about that.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Did I miss this? Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for attending. It is 6:02, so we're just 2 minutes after. I hope you all have a good rest of your night, and that is it. All right. Good night.
Thank